Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for our continuing discussions about the cannabis industry. Today, we're really very fortunate to have some resource experts who will be able to talk about all the questions that come up so frequently about licensing in the cannabis industry. Let me remind you first, though, that we do encourage your own questions. If you would like to submit them in the chat box. We will have some remarks by two of our industry experts first, and then I will spend a short time with the full panel asking some of the questions of them as follow-up to their remarks. And then I would like to get to all your questions, so please don't hesitate putting them in the chat box. But I do have to, before we go any farther with this program, have to thank Plunkett and Cooney, who generously is sponsoring all of our cannabis industry discussions over our series. So let me now introduce Saulius Mikalonis, who is the Senior Attorney for Environment, Energy and Resources and Cannabis Law at Plunkett and Cooney. He's going to make some brief remarks. Saulius?
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. So for my introductory remarks, I read something very interesting earlier in the week. The website 538.com, which probably everybody's familiar with every time there's an election, recently reported on a national Gallup poll numbers concerning American support for cannabis legalization. Gallup has tracked support for legalization since 1969. In 1969, at the height of the Summer of Love, only 12% of Americans supported legalization. In its most recent polling last November, that number is now 68% in favor of legalization. That's a national poll, not focusing just on Michigan or on the states that have either decriminalized or legalized cannabis. So Michigan is among the 17 states in the District of Columbia that have allowed recreational use for adults. Medical use in Michigan was approved in 2008, and adult use received its approval in 2018. Since 2008, Michigan has developed a robust regulatory system by which licensed operators can legally grow, process, and sell cannabis. The cannabis business in Michigan poses unique legal, scientific, and business challenges. Success can be driven by the level of sophistication of financial, technical, and legal advisors. You cannot know too much, and there's always something new to learn. There have been some growing pains on the path to licensing is constantly evolving through new regulations and guidance, all of which our keynote guest, Andrew Brisbo, has overseen. Plunkett Cooney's cannabis business law practice has grown with the market. We have numerous attorneys who practice in a variety of fields, from licensing, compliance, corporate formation, transactions, all of which require an understanding of legal requirements that are unique to the cannabis industry. Plunkett Cooney is proud to sponsor Detroit Regional Chamber events like this one that will provide insight into topics of interest to the business community. So thanks, looking forward to this.
Thank you very much, Saulius. And again, thank you for your sponsorship. So next up, we do have Andrew Brisbo, who is the Executive Director of the Michigan Marijuana Regulatory Agency, and really thrilled to have him with us here today. So Andrew, we're really looking forward to your remarks.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Tammy. Pleasure to be here. I wish we could be doing these things in person, but hopefully sometime soon. Nice to get out of the house. So I'm here to kind of talk about what's happening in the state of Michigan from a regulator's perspective and where we're headed with licensing and regulation, both in the medical and adult use markets, which our agency is kind of taking a holistic approach to as we look at the market collectively. And one of those things that's changed for anyone that's interested in starting a new business and engaging in this space is, as of March 1st, we now don't require a business to be licensed as a medical facility in order to get a license as an adult use establishment. And we think that will serve to start to open up the market and see a lot of new entrepreneurs coming into the adult use space without having to stop and get the medical license first. And we think that's also starting to spur greater participation across the state in different communities that previously had not had ordinances or had prohibitive ordinances in the adult use space. In terms of our licensing process, I think one thing that's important to note is how we've set this up overall as a two-step process. Most of the qualifications to be eligible for a license in the state are subject to a background investigation, and it's the qualifications of the individuals associated with the business more so than the physical site itself. So our step one process we call pre-qualification. And that's a point at which an individual can engage in that background check process and determine overall eligibility for licensing in the state. And then the step 2 process is the point at which they have to have the site secure, the facility built out. We do the inspections, both the regulatory compliance inspection as well as the fire inspection, to ensure that the site itself meets with all the conditions. And that's the point at which as well that we validate with the municipality that the operation of that facility is in line with all municipal ordinances. So those 2 steps allow some degree of flexibility. For individuals interested in starting a business, they can go through that pre-qualification step without having even determined what type of business they want to run or picked a location yet, just in order to determine overall eligibility through the process. And in many cases, municipalities now are requiring that pre-qualification step at the state level in order to be eligible for municipal approval as well. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our social equity program, which is intended to provide access and opportunity for individuals from the communities most impacted by the war on drugs. And individuals who qualify for that social equity process, such as residents of the city of Detroit, for example, would want to step through that social equity process at the state level first. So individuals who might be eligible for that, I'd encourage you to go to michigan.gov/social equity to look at the qualifications for that program. That application process is no fee. It's a stripped down, very simple process of applying. And then our team will evaluate eligibility, determine what fee reductions an individual might be eligible for, and can actually work with them to step through the process. Our social equity representatives will schedule sessions with our social equity qualifying applicants to walk them through the process from start to finish. As was mentioned, the process of becoming licensed can be a little bit challenging. There are a lot of legal requirements, a lot of regulatory requirements. And so we want to provide a service to our social equity participants to help them navigate that process from the state level. We can't offer guidance on how to structure your business or give you legal advice on best practices in terms of business operation itself, but we will help you navigate that licensing process and get you through from start to finish. So anyone starting a business really needs to be mindful of the timeframes. We see individuals who run into trouble in terms of their plans, not accounting for the length of the process to become licensed in the state. And just to give you a sense of that, if you're applying for a medical facility license, our background check process, so that step 1 process right now, is taking about 90 days. That's an average across the state for those applicants. And applications for the actual facility, that step 2 application, are taking about 125 days. So it's important to build those timeframes in if you're planning to operate a business in this space. If you have deadlines you need to meet at the municipal level, if you're working with investors and you need to start repaying debt, that process at the state level can be a little bit time consuming and can take longer depending on how quickly you can respond to any deficiencies as part of the application process as well. On the adult use side, it does move a little quicker. We have statutory deadlines to meet there. And that's again why we encourage folks to step through the process one piece at a time, submit that step 1 application and get approved before submitting the step 2 application. Because on the adult use side, the statute requires us to make a decision within 90 days. And what that means is if you submit that full application and aren't able to start that business and get approved within 90 days, then your application will have to be denied under the statute. So it's important to be prepared to move forward on the adult use side in particular. But our background check process, the step 1 process on the adult use side, is taking about 56 days right now. And the step 2 process for the actual physical site license is taking about 32 days. So all that said, we want to be a partner. We want to be there to answer questions. The agency stands at the ready to answer any questions about the application process or answer any questions about operational concerns that may not be clear in our statute and regulations. We are undergoing a review of our rules right now. Drafts of the revised rules should be out within about a month or so. So anyone who's operating or interested in operating should be aware of those changes that are forthcoming. When those rules are published on the website, there will be a public comment period and a public hearing, which will give us an opportunity to hear feedback from all stakeholders on those revised regulations. But the good news is the market here in Michigan is growing and continues to expand. I think there's still space in this market for businesses of all sizes to be successful. In March, we saw $145 million in retail sales, which was up 179% from March of 2020. That's the combined medical and adult use markets. And that 145 million was the largest month of sales so far. And that's even accounting for the fact that retail prices are down 46% from last March in the adult use market. So we see the volume of transactions going up, the volume of product being sold going up as well. But we are starting to see some maturity and stabilization in the market overall as we see supply starting to increase to meet consumer demand. And I think now is the opportune time as we see consumers shifting into the adult use market, into the licensed medical market, where they know that products are safety, quality tested, and they can be assured that there's a level of oversight, and they know that the products are as safe as possible for use, both for patients and adult use consumers. So that's kind of where we stand now. If you're interested in staying in tune with what's happening at with the agency, I encourage you to go to michigan.gov/MRA. You can sign up for our listserv. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow our MRA Instagram page to stay up to date with everything happening at the MRA. Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So now let's bring all of our panel together. So joining Saulius and Andrew is Eric Foster, Group Director, Strategy and Business Development for Banks and Company, LLC. And he's also the National Policy Director, Cannabis and Hemp Policy, Minorities for Medical Marijuana. So Eric, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be a part.
Thank you. So let me start with you since we've already heard from the other two gentlemen. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your role, what you do, and especially your national policy role?
Well, thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that. So at Banks and Company, we're a newly chamber member, but also a public affairs firm. We work in a number of different industry sectors, energy, education. But commercial marijuana is one where we've had the opportunity to have a lot of positive impact over the past 4 years, where we've worked with applicants who are going through the licensing process, both at a state level and at a local level. And then we've also worked with municipalities, either on behalf of our clients who are approaching licensing with respect to how they consider and develop their enabling ordinances or modify them. And then also for municipalities who want to craft a enabling ordinance for medical or recreational or both marijuana sectors. So we've also, and on behalf of the company, I've also been a part last year of the MRA's Racial Equity Advisory Work Group. Andrew invited me to come on board to be a part of that, where we identified 20 ideas and policy goals, some statutory, some appropriative, and some administrative rules that could positively create opportunity for people of color, both through the employment side, the ownership side, the supplier diversity side, as well as community investment and medical marijuana research, which is something that's picked up in a number of states and is something that we hope to do here in Michigan through statute. With that then led to Minorities for Medical Marijuana, which we've been a member of as well, which is the largest trade association for minorities in the commercial marijuana and hemp industry around the country and also internationally. And they asked me to come on board and work with them as their national policy director, because our work here in Michigan is so heavily involved in the policy side and regulatory side that is critical for not only applicants to understand the ins and outs for structuring their business and going through, but then also how do you create those policies at a state and local level in ways that make the path to ownership and compliance something that's clear, that's tangible, and that's practical. So with that, I've been working so far on a number of things relating to activities in Nevada around social equity licensing for consumption lounges, New York, and the new legalization that they passed there. Also other states with respect to what is happening in Connecticut, New Jersey, and a few other states, as well as a national level with the Marijuana Justice Coalition, which M4MM is a part of, that is looking at hopefully federal legalization. Although I do believe, based on my policy experience, we're still 4 to 6 years away from that happening. So that's a little bit of my background.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. Well, I have some questions, and so what I'm going to do is introduce a couple of them, and allow whoever might like to speak to it, if more than one would like to speak to it. But thinking about those who may be on today that are still looking to start up, and I believe we do have some. One of the questions that was asked was, what type of assets could I use to support the startup of my medical marijuana and recreational marijuana business? So for example, bank accounts, stocks, real estate, equipment, etc. Whoever would like to take that, please do.
Well, I'll jump in on that first. There's a couple things that you need to take in consideration because the process is capital intensive either way for medical or commercial recreational. That being said, having assets that you can access that are liquid. So if it is a home and you have the ability to utilize home equity loan to pull some equity out. If it is your stock investments or IRA or what you have in the bank, those are different models as well to be able to pull from. But one of the key things is partnering. This is an industry where the opportunities are there, but not a lot of people are going to be able to independently do it. So being able to partner with other people who have that same ability to pull resources together. Our experience has been during that first 90-day period when you start the licensing process, you're going to need to be able to pull and touch between 100 to 250,000 in capital to be able to pull all of the things that you need to get going and work through both the municipal process and the state process, because you have to work through both at the same time.
The other thing about partnering is when you're thinking about that, you have to be very careful who you're partnering with, making sure that they get past the background check if they have an interest greater than the required percentage. And also make sure that when you're organizing your documents, you get lawyers together. I can tell you that we've had delays in applying because people are still arguing about how the structure is going to work, who's going to be responsible, what the percentages are, and those things change all the time. And they can get very, very complicated. And the more complicated it is, the longer it's going to take you to get your approval.
And from the state's perspective, I wouldn't advocate for a certain structure, but Saulius is correct that depending on how you want to go about it, we see a lot of individuals who go through the pre-qualification process individually, and that way they can pass the background check before establishing the entity and ultimately applying for licensure. I think that was born from some of the early days when we still had a board where businesses would apply, and if they got denied, then the whole group was denied and they had to restructure and start over again. So there's no one way to go about it, but I think the point Eric was making that this is a non-traditional industry. You're not going to a bank to get a loan to start one of these businesses. So they're all sort of private equity funded, and we see a lot of partnerships, but that can carry certain risks with it as well in terms of knowing who you're doing business with.
Sure. So I think probably this is for you, Saulius, but perhaps also Eric or Andrew, you may want to chime in after. So the question is, what type of consultants might I need to help me with all aspects of the licensing process? This includes financial, documentation, facility planning, site acquisition, etc. What are the type of consultants you would advise your clients to make sure they have?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I've had clients who've done a variety of things. People have brought in technical experts in terms of growing and processing from out of state. And partnered with them. There's also, if you're building your own building from scratch, there's a lot of requirements that involve actually passing the Bureau of Fire Bureau's inspection, and sometimes that doesn't always go swimmingly. You've got financial, backers. You have consultants and accountants that have specialized in cannabis, so they're out there as well. You're going to need to get a competent real estate person. You have to find out where you can actually operate, because every community has complete control over how much, where, and how many, where they can go, which types of businesses, where they can go, zoning, and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, even if you're in a community that has welcomed it, Do you know if you're in the right location? So you're going to need an expert with zoning. You're going to have an expert. One of our attorneys specializes in local approvals, going and meeting with the supervisors and the boards and the different zoning boards and things like that. So I mean, it's just like any other business, only it's complicated by the fact that it's technically illegal under federal law, and so there's all this extra oversight, and the state has a very rigorous regulatory regime that you can easily run afoul of. So there's no one person that you can identify. There is an amalgam of experts that you're going to probably require, depending. I mean, if you have a building that's already up, but still, I mean, if you're doing a grow, what's your HVAC system going to look like? If you're doing processing, do you have an expert that tells you whether the materials you have on site are hazardous? Do you have to comply with environmental statutes and things like that? So there's a whole bunch of stuff. Fortunately, there's a lot of good resources out there that'll help you identify what you need. And you can always call an expert, one of us, and we can probably steer you in the right direction. We have lists of consultants that we deal with every day.
Additionally to Sal's point, so you're going to need, even with a facility that's existing from a renovation vantage point, you're going to need an architect for your site plans that have to be a part of your local application. You're going to need an attorney who understands not only the industry, but also the business structure and those complexities that will take place. You're going to need an engineering firm, be it civil engineering potentially. You're going to need a consultant that can help you through the licensing process, someone that understands also governmental affairs and community engagement, because that is something that's being picked up a lot by local communities. You're going to definitely need technical experts to help you with the operational functions so that you can get set up for compliance, technology, build out. You're going to need a litany. This is an industry where there are significant opportunities on the supplier side, because being our firm, Saul's firm, we're both vendors to the industry. We're not going to be licensed, but we're providing services. So there's a huge market for businesses to provide services. The average licensee needs anywhere from 40 to 80 different vendors to provide support and services in different phases of not only getting licensed, but then maintaining operation and maintaining compliance, because that is critical, maintaining compliance. And that's why your law firm is going to be with you from beginning to when you get out of the business. Your accountant, same thing. And a few other consultants will be with you for the duration as well.
I think Eric makes another good point. I mean, if you're interested in the cannabis field to be involved in, in the days of the gold rush, the people that made the money weren't necessarily the miners. They were the people that were providing services and supplies to the miners. So if you're interested in this industry, it doesn't have to be as a grower, processor, distributor, or whatever. There are other areas where you could be involved.
Right. So, let me, following up on that, what if someone is looking for diverse vendors, suppliers, diversity meaning ethnicity, ancestry, gender, et cetera? How do they find them?
So that's where a few things are going to come in. It's important. That's one of the places where a group like Minorities for Marijuana sits in, because we help try to promote and identify suppliers and diversity in that leg of the industry. But then also here in Michigan, when we had the Racial Equity Advisory Work Group, and moving forward, the Minority Supplier Diversity Council is another group. Your different chambers, so your African American chambers, Arab American, Latino American, Asian American, those organizations are going to be a part. And then even at the state level, that's one of the things that I know is going to be a part as the state kind of continues on, is I believe from what one of the suggestions we made was, how do we continue to advertise and bring people together for those sorts of matchmaking and vendor opportunities that you have, as you see in the automotive industry, healthcare industry, and others, so that you can find the vendors that are diverse, because that gets and helps increase spending and increases the viability of those suppliers and positively impacts communities of color and veterans, disabled, and women-owned businesses as well.
Which ultimately results in greater equity and within our
Exactly.
communities. Right, right. Well, thank you for that. Um, so if I have a business or I'm trying to get licensed for a business, or I've just got licensed, how do I build value in my business in order to attract venture capital investors?
So there's a few things that you can do from what our experience has been. Is one, you need to look at the composition of your leadership team, because the better quality of experts that you have as a part of your leadership team can add value when you are soliciting individuals for investment support. The community that you're operating in, market data in terms of both the medical patients that are in not only that county, but also within a county cluster. We tend to look at, when we do market studies for our clients, look at a multiple county cluster for the opportunities both on the recreational side and on the medical side in terms of patients. The state gives a great amount of data that you can utilize to project out spending per patient, spending per individual consumer, sales per day and per month for the different product types, so you can demonstrate the opportunity within that particular area that you want to go in, as well as the competition. But then additionally, looking at branding and marketing, that's another area of service support for consultants that are experts in marketing and positioning, product placement, and development. But then really the key is also going to be, and actually this is something else that's coming and being worked on that came out of the work group, is a Michigan marijuana market, which would be a intrastate stock exchange system where groups could list themselves to solicit private placement equity investment, similar to a commodity type of exchange, where they could raise capital from qualified investors inside of the state of Michigan. So that's another vehicle. So, but you, even in that vehicle, it's still going to be about how do you demonstrate your value proposition? What's unique about your approach to doing business? And those other components that I mentioned. I'm sure hopefully Saul will have some things to add on as well to that.
Well, the one point I'd like to make, especially, and because we've run across this, is, there's a lot of out-of-state operators coming in, trying to look to do work with already established Michigan entities. The way I've always looked at it is like, you have the little fish, then the medium fish eat the little fish, then the big fish eat the big fish, and the even bigger fish eat the big fish. And that's starting to happen now. One thing I want to remind people, just to remember and put this in the back of your head, and this is something that's come up recently in a couple matters, is that people, they're so eager to move on with their businesses and partner and get people involved and add new revenue sources and new investors. Remember that whenever there's any sort of material change in your organization, structure, or operations, you have to let Mr. Brisbo's agency know what's going on. If you don't, that's a violation of the statute and the regs. So that's one thing that people seem to forget. They're so focused on the bottom line, or so focused to get their business running, so focused to start making profits. They forget that, what would appear to be an innocuous change could really scuttle all their plans. That's one thing I want to leave people with.
Thank you. Okay, so one of the things Eric happened to mention when he was just providing remarks, he brought up promotion and marketing. So I actually have a question from the audience along that line. So along the same lines of consultants, there apparently are special rules regarding advertising and marketing for marijuana businesses. Is there a site or other resources that explains Michigan's advertising guidelines?
You want to check the administrative rules. There's an entire section specifically on marketing and advertising that contains certain restrictions, and that's something that's been opened up a bit with the revisions we made last year in June to allow a little more robust advertising. But there are some bills pending now in the legislature that would prohibit advertising on billboards. That's become a bit of a lightning rod for controversy to some degree. But basically, the agency requires that there be a marketing analysis that at least 70% of the intended audience for whatever the advertising might be, whether that be billboards or radio or social media, they have to have marketing analysis that shows that 70% of the viewers or recipients of that information would be the appropriate target audience.
Okay.
And Michigan is really good at that, having that detail in doing this now with other states and looking at what other states have set up. There's only a few that have detailed information that gives you step by step of what those rules are and what the process points for how you can advertise, because a lot of people will make assumptions that, oh, well, I can't. Well, no, you can. There's rules and process points. There's the four corners that you have to stay within, and Michigan gives really good clearance and guidance on that. And you also, though, too, need to look at the local ordinances as well, because within the local ordinances, there may be additional rules and compliance points for advertising that they will put into ordinance as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have another question, and I'm from participants. I'm guessing this might be for you, Andrew, but others may want to also add to it. And so what this individual is asking is that they're hearing about other cities opening up for applications only by word of mouth. And is there an easier way to know when cities are opening up their application process? Is there a newsletter or a communication source of some type? They are pre-approved by the state, but would like to submit applications to any new cities before their state approval expires.
So unfortunately, the state will not be the clearinghouse in that regard for you. We do try and track the status of municipal ordinances, but that's not a mandate on local units of government. We just ask that they send those to us because we know people come to us as a source of information. But that's really just tracking who's in and who's out. Does not track specifically what their requirements are, what their timeframes would be. So maybe one of the other gentlemen has some insight into the best way to track that.
Well, that's where you come to firms like Banks and Company and Plunkett Cooney, because we have staff at our company, and I'm sure at Plunkett Cooney they have staff and other consultants that are cataloging based off of state data and then their own calling and research to try to find that out and put together those sorts of spreadsheets to be able to target when communities have opted in, when they're having the conversations, what their application periods are. But really the best way is to, and I'm sure Plunkett Sal will say the same thing, bring on somebody like one of our firms that can go to the communities to lobby, to help them to consider opting in and walk them through what they can do, the processes that they can consider in their ordinance, and how to create something that's of a win-win for the community, for the opportunity, and for the industry. That's really the best way, because right now, at least per our spreadsheet analysis of communities, we're at 242 total that have opted in for medical, rec, or both. And we have 1,773 76 communities across the state of Michigan. So we're just at about 14%. So you're going to need someone that's focused in that area to help you.
Yeah, so we do a lot of one of the things Plunkett does is a lot of municipal work too. So I have and other attorneys in our group have actually been asked to appear before city councils and alike and give them a little primer on what the Michigan marijuana laws are like and what obligations, rights, and duties they have if they're interested. Sometimes those lead to ordinances, sometimes they don't. I've drafted a few ordinances, other attorneys in my group have drafted ordinances. But I think the question about, who's open and who's not was more of a question in the early stages. I think the information's out there, and most of the sophisticated people that are getting involved in this know the area generally where they want to operate. It could be a specific city, a specific county, or it could even be like within a range of a specific community. And then Google is your friend. I mean, we can help you too, but Google is your friend. So for example, if for some reason Livingston County is your target area, it's a whole bunch of municipalities in Livingston County, and it doesn't take much Googling to figure out what's there. We can direct you. I think there's other organizations, even the Michigan Municipal League, entities like that. But again, in the old days, everybody was sort of it's almost like a game of Battleship, right? You hit my battleship. No, you missed. But I think that the information's out there for someone eager to look. And obviously, Eric, myself, we can easily steer you. The best plan, though, in my opinion, based on my experiences, know generally where you want to be. Some people are pretty open, like, I don't care where I am, right? But you have to think about, especially depending on your business, how close are you to, like, if you're a grower, how close are you to the processors? How close are you? I mean, all those logistical issues, just like any business needs to be factored in, right? I mean, you could find the perfect space, but it could be in a far corner, so far away from your contracts that it's really expensive to get the stuff out there. So again, like Eric was mentioning earlier, it's a really complicated field. There's a lot of moving parts. So you really need to think hard when you start about all sorts of things, and location is one of them.
And to just add to Saul's point, yes, so many of the communities are listing information online regarding where they are, either if they've opted in, what their process points are. They make it pretty easy to find. So as my partner and colleague, Simone Cason, always says, God and Google. It will get you there as well. So you'll be able to find it if you want to. If you don't, you don't have to come to groups like us. You can find a lot of that on your own.
Okay, thank you. Let's change direction a little bit here and talk about taxes. So first of all, there's a question that is asking, what is the IRS 280E rule, and what can be written off as a business expense for state and federal taxes? Anyone?
So that's a great question. Oh, do you want to jump in, Saul?
No, go ahead, Eric.
Okay, so IRS 280E is with respect to a business that's operating in the controlled substance arena and what they cannot write off, which based on federal rule are normal operating expenses of a business. Everything has to be tied to, in terms of what you can write off, tied to cost of goods sold expenses. So any of the expenses that are tied to the cost of production or sale of the actual goods that you're making. If you're on the growing side and the processing side, you have, or even the testing labs to a certain degree, or to the secure transporters, you have a greater number of opportunities to use areas, not only of your business, but different operation points, production points that you can utilize legally for being able to write those off as cost of goods sold expenses. If you're on the retail side or the consumption facility side, you've got really limited options. Now that's at the federal level. Now I believe, Andrew, if you could tell us, and so if you could tell us, I believe at the state level, Michigan may have passed a law that allows you to be able to write off operating expenses on your state business taxes. And some states do that. Arkansas does that. Florida does that. So there are a few states that specifically have provided statutory relief on your in-state business taxes for you to be able to write off those expenses that you can't on your federal. But Michigan, are we at that point yet? Do we allow that?
There's a provision in the Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act that indicates in computing net income for marijuana establishments, deductions from state taxes are allowed for all the ordinary and necessary expenses paid or incurred during the taxable year in carrying out a trade or business. And I'm not here to interpret that for anyone, but that's what the law says.
Yeah, there's also
Yeah.
there's also revenue bulletins that the Michigan Department of Treasury puts out with respect to both, I think, adult use and medical. So I would refer you to that. I'm not going to. I mean, I got up on my screen now, and I'm not going to regurgitate it. But go to there's a reason that the act for adult use is called the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. There's specific that, and I think actually local communities, I think I read somewhere $10 million of taxes went to local communities based on 2020. Is that right, Andrew?
Correct. It was 5 million to municipalities, 5 million to counties. So about $28,000 per retailer or micro business, both to municipalities and counties from fiscal 20.
We're running out of time, and I hate this because I think there's just so many more places we could go and so much more we could discuss. You've been such a wealth of information for our viewers today, and I've got a lot more questions, but maybe we'll continue it at another time. But is there anything that I didn't ask that you think is the most important that you want to make sure and close out the program and offer? And Andrew, I'll start with you first.
I think we covered the high level stuff from my side. I do think that's what's been clear here is, the state licensing process, while it gets a lot of attention and, all the headlines are grabbed by the amount of revenue being collected and taxes and how the business is doing overall, it sort of glosses over the complexity of this. And I think we saw that at the beginning, that a lot of folks thought it was easy to get in. They may have been operating in the gray market and had a skill set that would play well in this market, but it is an incredibly complex business type on top of being a rigorous regulatory system, unlike anything else. So I think it's very important to do your due diligence and understand where you want to be and do a lot of planning to get into this. And I think this point has been made before that getting a license and operating the business is one piece. It is capital intensive, but compliance is a high level expectation in this space as well.
So,
oops, I didn't unmute myself. Pardon me. Yeah, I agree with Andrew. I mean, this is a very complex area. In my background, I've been an environmental attorney for over 35 years. And in the beginning, I first got involved in this because environmental attorneys do regulations. That's all we do every day, right? We read statutes and regs. And I used to joke, I said, it's probably easier to get a hazardous waste landfill licensed in Michigan than it was to get a license for either grow or processing back in the early days. It's gotten a lot better through a lot of it through the efforts of Andrew and his staff. I mean, things have certainly streamlined. I'm really looking forward to seeing the new regs, not because they're scintillating, but I'd like to be able to tell my clients there's certain things going on. And I have a few questions about how things are run and maybe they could be run a little better, but again, that's considering where we've come. Back in the day where we had people opening up dispensaries based under the MMMA, and to where we are now, incredibly sophisticated. And it's very complex, and there's, a lot of people want to get into it, but again, there's so many ways you can mess up, so many ways. And so my recommendation is do your homework. And you don't have to necessarily hire a lawyer right off the bat, but do your homework. The clients that we have that succeed are the ones have really put in the elbow grease and the hours putting their documentation together, asking us, what do we need? And putting all that stuff together in a format that's incredibly organized and makes it easy for the MRA to say yes, right? I tell my environmental clients the same thing. You want a license, you want a permit, make it so it's impossible for them to say no. And that means a lot of legwork, a lot of organization. You can't just, stick a bunch of documents in a manila folder and send it in and expect that you're going to get a response that's favorable to you. So that's the one thing I want to take people away from. Just, a lot of it depends on you and how much effort, how much work, and considering, if you're going to make the effort, you're going to get the money and you're going to put it all together, it's worth making the effort.
Thank you, Sal. Eric.
So thank you, Tammy, and thank you guys for today. A couple things. One, people make have a misunderstanding about banking. There are banking opportunities for your business, not loan products or some of the traditional services, but deposit services, payroll, and some other services with respect to, there's 2 credit unions in Michigan and 2 banks in Michigan that are at least public with that. Live Life Federal Credit Union, Dart Bank, Wildfire Credit Union, and G.W. Jones Exchange Bank that provide banking services to commercial marijuana businesses. The other thing I want to say is that, and I use the term commercial marijuana and commercial hemp implicitly and specifically because this is a commercial industry and people have to approach it in that vein. This is not something that is just, I can pop up with an idea, I have a few dollars, let's start a business. No. There are opportunities for you if you can collaborate with people, set up a good structure, hire and bring on a good team to get licensed, but it is a commercial industry. It's set up and it's structured in Michigan and a lot of states very similar to the automotive industry. You have the manufacturing, you have the aftermarket product development, processor, you have R&D, you have logistics with the secure transporters, and you have retail, your dealerships, if you will, with the provisioning centers and the recreational retailers. So you have to treat it as such. There are rules, but communities that have opted in and the state are very transparent. If you follow the rules, you have an opportunity. If you want the rules to be changed or dumbed down or modified to make it easy, that's not going to be this state, and that's perfectly okay because we want a good compliance and regulatory environment so that you get rid of any bad actors and that you have an industry that does what every other industry does, creates opportunity and are good corporate players and small business players in the state.
Thank you, Eric. Well, we have definitely gone over time, so I do have to bring this to a close. I do want to thank Saul, Andrew, and Eric once again for their great expertise in replying to all the different questions from our participants, and hopefully we can go further on another program. For those of you who are watching, this will be posted on the Chamber's website, detroitchamber.com. And also you will find their future programs that are going to be scheduled so that you can also watch them. Again, thank you to Plunkett, Cooney, Saul. Please pass along to your colleagues. We really appreciate the scholarship. To all of you who joined us today to listen in, we hope you got some good information out of this, and we look forward to seeing you on future programs. So good afternoon, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.